This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
The Archives.
Episode 383. Books for the Holidays.
I asked myself, who is someone I see as a master of the craft of economics? And one person rose to my mind. Every time I see him write about an economics topic, his thinking is clear, careful, and interesting.
This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
Yeah, he's not talking about Steve Keen, by the way. I picked that up from a podcast called Market Power. But what is the answer to that question? Which of the economists who've written books that might actually be worth reading during this holiday season? Debunking Economics is not one of them. Maybe we'll take that as read. So instead, gift token in hand, book voucher in hand, let's go shopping. So Christmas time, it's time with the family, and you know what that means. You'll probably get a bit bored fairly soon, won't you? You've probably got some book vouchers as well that you've got to spend. So here's how we can help you through that festive period. We've got a bunch of books to use those tokens on, so you can still have time with the family. But, you know, while they're watching Strictly Come Dancing, you can be sitting in the corner reading about economics or income diversity, or is capitalism a science? The shortfalls of capitalism, all of that, whilst the rest of them are stuck into the TV. You can still, obviously, partake of the alcohol. So what do you buy? Actually, Steve, this is a question you often get asked, isn't it? And I get asked sometimes as well, particularly from newer listeners who are saying, well, you know, we're interested about all of this. We want to read more. Where do we start? So you've got some books. I've got some books, some of which you might not like, but I think are still worth dipping into. And we've got one or two fun ones as well. But let's start with, because it's so fundamental, isn't it, to actually understanding how economics works, double entry bookkeeping. Now, if you're an accountant, actually, you know what? Even if you are an accountant, I suspect you're not that familiar with double entry bookkeeping these days, because you're probably using a software package that does it all for you. So understanding double entry bookkeeping is pretty fundamental to understanding how the economy really works, isn't it?
Yeah, but this book isn't so much about how to do it as how it was first invented, and the history of its evolution in Italy back, I think, in the 1500s. I haven't read it for a while, but it's a great read because, I mean, frankly, you know the usual story. The people say that somebody becomes an economist because they lack the personality and savoir-faire to be an accountant. It's not exactly regarded as an exciting profession, but Jane Gleason White does a wonderful job of making it extremely interesting how the concept of double entry bookkeeping came about. And for people who are, you know, particularly people who know something about modern monetary theory, or even more so people who don't and think that they could talk about money without understanding double entry bookkeeping, this is the book for you.
And it's an easy read?
It's an easy read. It's, I mean, if you talk books on the anthropology of money, you normally get taught, you know, David Graeber's Debt the First 5,000 Years, which is a great book. And there's one other I'd mention there as well, which is, I've suddenly forgotten the name. Felix Martin, the Money, the Unauthorized Biography. So they're both great on the history of how money came about. But money these days fundamentally is an exercise in double entry bookkeeping. And that actually is a story in its own right, which Jane Gleason White tells extremely well.
And the book is just called Double Entry, isn't it? So you've given one. Let me start with a very, very, very simple book. Which actually isn't really about economics, and some of it I think is a bit dubious, but it's a fun read for Christmas, and actually a good one to give if you've got someone who's not really interested in economics except at a very base level. It's called The Economic Naturalist. It's by a guy called Robert Frank. Why economics explains almost everything. So it's got a picture on the front, and this is an example of just the shallowness of the whole book, but it's still fun. There's a picture of a milk carton on the front, a square milk carton. So, of course, it's making the point inside. Why are milk cartons square? And you know the answer to that, as everyone can guess at that. It's so that they can be stacked easily, so you get more shelf space, easier to transport, all that sort of stuff. So it goes through a whole load of stuff like that. It doesn't get deep. It's a good book for Christmas for somebody, perhaps, about just fundamental things that we see every day, and how much of them.
Does it mention supply and demand?
No, I don't think it does anywhere in the book. Actually, you'll be very pleased to know.
That's good. Okay, so it's actually worth reading. Okay.
Well, I think it's. I mean, I've read most of it. A lot of it, I was thinking, well, this is a bit of the bleeding obvious, but it's still fun, and it makes you think a little bit. So that's mine. Okay, what have you got next?
Well, I haven't got my list in front of me, mate. So you better check your mic review.
Oh well, okay. How nature works: the science of self-organized criticality.
That was indeed the one I was going to pull out.
That sounds like the opposite extreme from the book I've just been talking about.
No, it's not. It's a beautifully written book. Per Back. It's a crazy name, but that literally is his name. His first name is Per, and his second name is Back, B-A-K. Talk about cutting out the complexity in one's name. But he's actually talking about one of the most difficult subjects to comprehend, and that's what does it mean to say something is complex. And the example, he was actually responsible for the mathematics of this example, which he does in a very, very simple way in the book, and that is what makes a pile of sand fall. If you're at the beach, British people do know what a beach is, don't they?
Well, yeah, if they've been overseas, yeah. Otherwise, they know what a mud flat pretending to be a beach is.
Fair enough. Okay. You've been to Spain, you pick this. It's white, okay, and it's lumpy stuff, and you pick it up and you drop a grain at a time, and for a while, what will happen is that, pardon me being facetious there, but I do come from Sydney, so I'm allowed a bit of license at this time of year. Anyway,
yeah, we've seen it in egg timers in this country. We know what it is.
Okay. So you're dropping grains of sand on the beach, and for a while, what happens is a triangle or a pyramid forms, and then you keep on dropping it further, and suddenly there's a collapse in the sand, and then you get another broader pyramid, and then you keep on doing it. The pyramid, roughly speaking, pyramidal shape, gets broader and broader and broader with a series of cascades when the height of the pyramid gets too high to support the current angle, and then it falls down again. And I can't remember the actual details of the mathematics, but he goes through showing what the critical value is working with dry sand at the point at which the angle gets too steep for the system to hold. And what you do not get a gradual transition. What you get is it stacks up for a while, then it collapses, stacks and then collapses. And that complex dynamic is extremely well explained by Per Back, and he goes through several other very useful examples as well. So it's a fabulous book to get your head around one of the most complicated concepts, which is complexity.
And that, is so much about where we've gone wrong in economics, isn't it? Because you
would enjoy it, mate. I'd recommend it to you. If it wasn't being totally broke and stingy, I'd send you it as a Christmas present.
But I know that. Okay, well, I'll pay for it out of my own money. But yeah, no, I'll almost only get a book token. Or you know where it is. I write it off against the business. Yeah,
there you go. It is a business expense. You've learned something.
Well, it is. It's fair enough, isn't it? I've got to talk to you. I need to know what you're talking about. I've got to be able to call you out. So I need to read these things. So that does sound good. I mean, this is where we've gone wrong with economics, because we don't assume that those sudden changes, almost like those tipping points, the same as where we're going wrong with climate science.
Exactly like a tipping point. Yeah,
we just assume that they don't exist.
That's called a cusp catastrophe, CUSP catastrophe, by the way, and he explains those as well. So you have a period of gradual change, and this is imagined like you've got an overhanging cliff, and they're pushing the overhang further and further forward. Or either you've got a slope, and geographical forces or tectonic forces are pushing it further. At some point, it goes from being a slope to a cliff to a precipice, and then, of course, going over the edge of one has a dramatically different impact on going over the edge of the other. So he explains that as well.
So, look, I was in a bookshop earlier this year, maybe tail end of last year, and looking at books, wanting one next to buy, and somebody, a total stranger, because we're all sort of like in that same area, sort of like the economics and history area of the bookshop.
You went in personal to sell.
The bit of the bookshop that's normally deserted. So actually, if someone else is there, you feel like you've got to talk to them, and they feel like they've got to talk to you. So this guy just pointed to this book and says, "You've got to read this." And it was Haju Chang's 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, which is a very easy read. And have you read it? And is there anything you disagree with? It's pretty spot on, isn't it?
I'm afraid I've got a copy and I haven't read it yet. It's one of those things. I'm too busy writing books to read others. So it is on my list of entries in my current Kindle collection to read, but I haven't got there yet.
Well, I mean, those 23 things, thing number one, just to get you off on the straight and narrow, there's no such thing as a free market. You know, it starts there and it starts to delve deeper about the things that we take.
Maybe you should send it to John Hearn.
I'm not even going to enter into that. Do you think So John Hearn is a guy who just keeps on tweeting us, doesn't he? He's sort of like
He does, and, He's a nice bloke.
Yeah, I'm sure he is, but his favourite expression...
with a book shoved in his mouth so he couldn't talk.
Well, you know, I know some people who are great people, but they also have this expression, I'm sorry, you're wrong. And you can't go back to them and say, well, have you ever thought that you might be wrong? No, you're wrong. I just get the impression that he's that sort of guy. Yeah. So anyway, this is a very good read. And for everybody, again, you know, you don't need to be interested in economics. It's written at such a basic level. But it really does dispel the myths that a free enterprise. So, and it's funny as well. That's the other good thing about it as well. The guy's got a sense of humor.
He's got a good sense of humor.
So 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. Haju Chang is on your Christmas shopping list as well. Well, we're getting through them. Minsky, Can It Happen Again?
Yeah, this is actually, I should send this to Paul Krugman because, over a decade ago now, after the financial crisis, Krugman said he was going to read Minsky. And he mentioned he's chosen Minsky's latest book, Stabilizing an Unstable Economy. And I sort of face-palmed. If you don't know Minsky, then it's an obvious title to buy. If you do know Minsky, you know that he spent 15 years writing the bloody thing. He'd already written a major book called John Maynard Keynes, which is not a biography. It's actually him stating his financial instability hypothesis in great detail. And he called it After Keynes, in a tribute to Keynes, because Minsky himself had not read Keynes until in the mid-1960s, when he developed his hypothesis back in the mid-1950s. And he got the shock of his life when he read Keynes in the original, rather than reading what he got in textbooks. And that's why he named this book After Keynes. Anyway, he was then asked to write a second book by the same publishers, Edward Elgar, and I've lost touch with them, but I knew the Edgar family quite well. And they told me he spent 15 years writing the damn thing and never actually properly finished it, and really couldn't think of anything else new to say. And I regard it as a useless book. So if you want to read the heavy-duty stuff, then read the book John Maynard Keynes by Minsky. But if you want to get to know him in an afternoon, then buy a copy of Can It Happen Again? It in inverted commas, happen again. And that's a fabulous selection of essays. Minsky wrote extremely well in the short and pretty poorly in the long. So one or two of these short chapters by Minsky, you'll understand what he's talking about. It's a much more realistic picture of capitalism, financial capitalism, than anything else I've ever read. He's not strong on the production side of things, which tends to apply to most people who work in monetary theory, but he's certainly strong on how the monetary system works and how it causes instability in a capitalist economy. And that's a great read. So read that and you'll be damn sight smarter than Paul Krugman, which is a low bar, but nonetheless.
Ooh, well, look, it's funny you should say that. I'll come on to that in a second. So this is 20 short essays by Minsky. It's called Can It Happen Again? Essays on Instability and Finance. Okay, well, that's a good call. So, yeah, it's worth reading a bit of Paul Krugman, though, isn't it? Just to see what you agree and disagree with. Because I've
read too much.
So I read End This Depression Now, which is, about the...
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I was sent a pirate copy of that by somebody who was pissed off that it was being published in the first place, so that I can have a go at it before it came out. But anyway, tell us about it.
Well, so... Look, I mean, I know the biggest difference between you and Krugman is that, I mean, he doesn't get this whole thing about debt, does he? I mean, he certainly fits into that school of thought that if I borrow money off you, then you've got the money. Therefore, there's been no change in the amount of money that's in circulation.
Therefore no change in aggregate demand. Yeah,
he's a long way from MMT, but he is. He is Keynesian in his approach, in that he does believe at a downturn. This whole book really is about the depression we thought we were heading to in 2008. We never really got quite as far as we thought it did. Did it? But I mean, his whole point of that is that we've got to public spend our way out of it. You know, he's not in that extreme of saying, well, we've got to reduce government spending. He is.
He was good. And that's where he's worthwhile. I mean, the pity is that I regard him as a bit like John Hicks without the intellectual development that John Hicks went with over time, because Hicks wrote a simplified version of Keynes, which had nothing to do with Keynes. It was called what is it called? Mr. Keynes and the Classic: A Suggested Interpretation. This is an essay back in the 1930s. And all the neoclassicals read that rather than reading Keynes, thought they'd read Keynes, and then we got what they called Keynesian economics afterwards, which anybody who knows Keynes actually titled bastard Keynesianism. That was Joan Robinson's term for it. So Krugman is a bastard Keynesianism, and as bastards go, he ain't too bad.
Yeah, and and he acknowledges he's not one of these people as well who says if you've got more money, you've got more inflation.
No, he's been he's more realistic. Yeah,
big graph here showing the reserve balances with the Federal Reserve banks and how much it's skyrocketed since 2009. Without seeing inflation resulting from all of that. So I think there's a lot in that book you would agree with. It's just he just needs to take that final step and acknowledge, and I'm sure he does acknowledge that bank loans create money. I'm sure he acknowledges that.
No, he doesn't.
Well, I mean, that's... Okay. You don't. I mean, that's not even.
He models banks. He's a great fan of the loanable funds model of banking, and the loanable funds model of banking says that banks are intermediaries between savers and borrowers, and all this stuff. He's example of a. Anything he does, he's all about loanable funds. And that's the myth that the Bank of England tried to knock out of the ballpark in 2014. And they're still regurgitating it today. And that's what they gave Bernanke effectively the Nobel Prize for. So, no, he doesn't understand banking.
Right. What he does have in his favour is he's very easy to read, isn't he? Which is why he's why he's so successful. I mean,
he's a laxative, intellectual laxative. Yep. Sorry.
And so I'm sure you could say
it is Christmas. I'm allowed to be uncharitable.
Bah humbug. Look, we're going to take it's a short one today.
Up for your family.
So we're going to have to get a quick break in now because we've got a few more books to look at when we come back. It's the Debunking Economics Christmas special. Back in just a second.
This is the Debunking Economics podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
Well, we're looking at books that you could buy yourself or buy someone you love. Well, maybe they won't love you afterwards if they're not into economics. Hey, darling, I bought you an economics textbook. Thank you. Look at that.
Here's your divorce papers. Yeah,
exactly. I bought you some divorce papers. Here you go. So we'll come to you. Is it your turn or my turn? I think I just said Paul Krugman. I'm going to throw another one in there.
You did. You pulled one of mine out to remind me.
Everyone was confused. Yeah? Everyone was confused by the break. So another easy read. I'm doing all the easy reads. Well, yours are easy as well, aren't they? I think.
Relatively.
We don't. So Yanis Varoufakis, another good writer, and his
excellent
book,
writer.
which, Talking to My Daughter: The Brief History of Capitalism. I think I haven't read any of his others, but this is a great book, and I've only just recently read it. So this is him with I think he wrote it in a couple of weeks on an island in Greece. Because he's trying to explain how the economy really worked to his daughter. And it's a great book.
And one of the Yanis's book I have read is Adults in the Room. And I have to say that read like a novel. The opening scene actually has Yanis.
This was about the EU and Greek debt and
his own experience being finance minister for Greece, which he had no intention of ever becoming, but it just it happened out of the politics of the Grecian elections under the austerity of the EU after the financial crisis. And it's a brilliant read. I really think it should be made into a movie. So I've known Yanis for 40 years now, and whenever I first met him, he's one of the few people I know who speaks not only in completely formed paragraphs, but with the intonation of somebody who's doing Shakespearean play reading. And the reason for that is he actually learnt, and I know this from knowing him personally, of course, he learnt to speak English by reading Shakespearean plays. So he's got the talent to write that
he speaks
well.
In sonnets.
And it's speaks in sonnets, and it's. I have absolute confidence that book would be as great a read as Adults in the Room.
Right. So anything by Yanis Varoufakis then really should be on the Christmas list. All right, one of yours then. Our final. So we're on to climate change now. Our final warning: 6 degrees of climate emergency.
Yeah. Mark Linus wrote this book, and I've met Mark when I was in England. And the only complaint I have about the book is that, not being an academic, he hasn't given actual journal page references and so on for the claims that he makes, which is a great pity, because what he's done, which is an enormous amount of work, he's gone through all the various predictions of climate scientists, people who know what the hell they're talking about rather than bloody economists on climate change. He's gone through all the papers he can find and ranked their predictions by degrees Celsius increase. And 1 degree, you start getting a range of potential troubles, like with the Arctic summer sea ice disappears. 2 degrees, more damages. And then he goes through all the sorts of damages which can occur. So one of my favourites to talk about is the prediction from Philip Anderson, who just happens to be Professor of Atmospheric Chemistry at Harvard University and the man who identified the hole in the ozone layer back in the late 80s. He predicts that about 3 degrees of warming or less will cause the ozone layer to break down. So there's things like that, and there's insect plagues and all sorts of things that Linus has organised very carefully in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And by the time you get to the number 3, you don't want to go any further. And economists, I'm just reading a paper by a bunch of economists now, that predicts a 17% fall in GDP with an 8-degree increase in temperature. Linus stopped at 6 because by that stage most life forms are extinct.
Well, they say was that GDP per capita they were talking about? That because GDP in total. Okay, I was going to say because it might be per capita, it might be in 17%. If the population of the world has halved, those that are left will see their GDP falling by 17%. But
the only population left at 8 degrees warming is going to have alligator skins, not human.
Right. Okay. Well, there's some people like that in far north Queensland.
That's true. Yeah, and in economics.
And economics as well.
Sorry.
All right. So, all right. Well, okay. So it's hardly
Mark Linus, 6 degrees. Do you want to? If anybody says, "What's this global warming all about?" Read Mark Linus. You'll get an idea of why I, in particular, am so terrified by the stuff that economists are blasé about.
But do you know what? People will still be split, won't we? There'll be people who'll go, "Oh, this is all just alarmist nonsense."
Yeah, sure. They can read the news reports in a year's time or 10 years' time if they're lucky.
Yeah, well, it keeps on happening, doesn't it? I mean, just in talking about far north Queensland, I mean, Cairns Airport underneath underwater.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great way to fly. All you do is hop in a plane, get your paddle out, rotor the runway.
Fight off the crocodiles.
Planes were actually floating at Cairns Airport.
Yeah, astonishing.
Was it 2 meters of rain in 2 days?
Something like that. Yeah, it was. I don't know the numbers behind it. I do know there was a news report I saw, and there's this far north Queensland going, "Oh yeah, it's a bit of a problem, especially with the crocs." Which of course everyone around the world will love. A far north Queenslander talking about, "Yeah, I got a bit of a problem with the crocs out here at the airport." But anyway, so there we are. It keeps on happening, doesn't it? All right, so it's my turn now, isn't it? What am I going to go for? Yep. I'm surprised you didn't have Mariana Mazzucato, I should say, in your list. So The Entrepreneurial State, Debunking Public versus Private Sector Myths is a good read as well.
It is.
There's got to be an understanding of this, that, the public sector doesn't always do everything better. And you would have thought by now, particularly people living in the UK, everyone would have got used to that idea. And I know you keep on rabbiting on about UK trains, but they are a great case in point, aren't they? But I mean, also, health. The US is, has a predominantly private health system. They spend twice as much on health as we do in the UK. They've got a life expectancy that's less than in the UK. But the UK, and we'll talk about this in next week's episode, the UK health system is sort of like being driven towards privatisation by the government not investing in the public sector. So in that context, this is an important book for everybody.
I actually would suggest reading Mariana's book in conjunction with Bill Janeway's. I think it's called Doing Capitalism In, and I've forgotten the rest of the title at the moment. But what they both emphasise fundamentally is that innovation is funded by people who can afford to lose money. And in that case, the two groups that can afford to lose money are multi-billionaire venture capitalists and the government. Okay, so the government, what that means is that you can try things, you can be innovative because it doesn't matter if you lose money. Whereas for most people, they try to innovate something that doesn't work, they're bankrupt and they're out of the game. So in that sense, there's a reason to expect innovation to be done both by the state and by wealthy individuals in a market economy. And there's a symbiosis between the two. It's not, one is terrible, the other's great, or vice versa. They both have their roles, and you'll get out of reading Mariana with Bill Janeway, way, you'll get a good picture on how innovation is funded, if not actually done.
Doing Capitalism in the Innovation Economy is what the book's called, actually.
There it is.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
So, all right, we're almost there. This is a very short episode this week, but, we've got to give you time to get on and read these books. So a non-economics book. I've got one, you've got one. This is a book I'm going to start reading in a second. Just as soon as we finish talking, Steve. David Mitchell.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to read a book that wasn't about economics, actually, but I still wanted to learn some stuff. And so I was in a bookshop. I read a couple of pages in the bookshop and I thought, yeah, this looks amusing. Plus, I need to get up on all of this stuff. David Mitchell, Unruly, A History of England's Kings and Queens. And the reason I wanted to read this is because my wife has just undergone the residency test for the UK. And she had to do this speed learning course on English history, which in Australia, of course, you don't do a great deal on. So she had to get up to speed with, England's kings and queens, because you get asked a lot of questions as part of your residency test these days.
They're going back past Fergie here, are they?
Yeah, past. We're going back to, the Norman Conquest.
Queen Elizabeth. Okay.
Yeah, the whole history. There's a lot of history in the UK. So I thought, as she was doing all of that, I was thinking, crikey, she knows more about it than I do now. So I should have paid more attention at history at school. And my daughter's madly keen on history. So I'm thinking, I need to catch up on this. And David Mitchell, I don't know if you know who he is, but if you've ever seen Would I Lie to You, he's one of the panel members on that. He was also in a show called The Peep Show. He's a funny guy. He writes really well. I think he writes for one of the newspapers. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so that's my book, which is new out, Unruly, The History of Kings and Queens from David Mitchell. Your book, goes back to... Actually, you've said it's 2003. It has to be earlier than that. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is the
final version.
Right.
The fifth volume in the trilogy was published in 2003, and this is all five together. So we read out the title.
Well, you've got The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the original radio scripts. Now, you know what? It was. Yep. I was just a young lad. I don't think how old I'd be. I'd be about 10 or 12 or something. So. In the 70s, I think, is when it all started, wasn't it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on Radio 4. And I actually heard the first episode, the very first time it was aired. And, Well,
that gives us something in common, because so did I. I actually remember sitting in a share house in Newtown in the 1970s. And out comes the tune, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and off we go with that absolutely wonderfully crazy story of Arthur Dent and his friend Ford Prefect that actually came not from Islington but from a star system close to Betelgeuse, and the arrival of the Vocon constructor fleet that was about to destroy Earth to make way for a hyperbar spy. It is the most brilliantly written, idiosyncratic, hilarious piece of writing I've ever read, I would say. And whenever I need a break from the real world because it's too damn crazy here, I go off and read Douglas's wonderful imagination. And
the only thing is the craziness
people are starting to forget.
Craziness might have been surpassed by reality, but there's some fantastic ideas. Like, for example, if we could just fuel spacecraft by
the infinite
infinite improbability.
Yeah, and
so you have the infinite improbability drive.
And there's such wonderful comments in there, like talking about the invention of the infinite improbability drive. That was invented by taking a finite improbability drive and dropping it into a good Brownian motion generator, such as a good hot cup of tea. And when this was done, it was done by a graduate student cleaning up after a particularly unsuccessful party, and just reasoning that he could do it. So he did it and invented it out of thin air. And he was then about to be awarded the Galactic Nobel Prize for Physics when he was suddenly lynched by a bunch of physicists who realized what they really couldn't stand was a smartass. I don't know why, but I feel very sympathetic towards that.
I don't know. I was thinking, I'm wondering which character in it you're based on, actually. And then I was thinking maybe
Zaphod Beeblebrox. You're not reading the blog.
Right, okay. Well, definitely. I know the only reason for that is because, of course, he was the only man who was put into the, what did they call it, the vortex, where you were presented with the whole
the
total perspective vortex. Yeah. That's right, where you were presented with the whole of mankind and humanity and the world and the universe. And just the sheer enormity of it, and you in relation to it all with a tiny, tiny micro dot with the little arrow saying you are here, which apparently blows most people's brains out. But Zaphod Beeblebrox just made him realize just how important he was to the universe.
That's not quite right.
Yeah, that's you.
He had to go through. He had to go a particular window. Remember, out of the building of the what's it called, the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation's book publishing wing.
Yeah.
But anyway, my thing is more where you have these crazy ideas that occur in my head. I have no idea where they come from, and they end up making sense. That was why I went for Zaphod rather than Ford Prefect. It was my previous choice. But people, if you haven't read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you want to get an escape from the madness of the real world, then jump into Adams's brilliant imagination, and you'll be transported, and you'll be laughing, and you'll forget the garbage that's going on all around you. It's absolutely worth it. I'd hate to see that book forgotten just by the passage of time.
I don't think it ever will be. So, okay, well, there we are. We've come to the end. Look, I've got a couple of books which I haven't read yet, which I've got ready for over the Christmas. So the Euro and its threat to the future of Europe, Joseph Stiglitz. Have you read that?
No, but again, Joe's somebody I do respect. I've read his previous book about globalization, and I thought it was both well written and quite brave, because he well and truly stepped outside the boundaries of the profession, and actually supported one of his daughters on a march, an anti-globalization march way back in the early 2000s, which is why he wrote the book. So again, Joe's one of the mainstream that I have a lot of time for.
And I think somebody told us we should read Ben Steele's book on the Battle of Bretton Woods, which I haven't read yet. I got a copy of it, but I haven't read yet.
I'm about 2/3 of the way through it, and it really does point out the impact that just two individuals can have, because Harry Dexter White, who really was just happened to be a bureaucrat in the right place at the wrong time, really set up the shape of the global financial system, and overwhelmed Keynes, who had the sensible idea of bringing about an international currency. Keynes got there in a weird way, but because he was trying to maintain in some ways British influence. But it's a very good overview of how we ended up in Harry White's world, and Harry White's world is where we should not have ended up.
And I'm halfway through reading, and this will surprise you, Mervyn King, former Bank of England governor, The End of Alchemy, Money, Banking and the Future. Oh, yeah. So what did you make of that?
Yeah. I mean, again, Mervyn...
But surprising. I mean, he's not... He acknowledges, I guess he was from the Bank of England. The Bank of England has acknowledged the role of private banks in the creation of debt. So at least he's part way there.
Well, there was actually staff within the bank then, rather than the managing people like Mervyn that acknowledged that. And I know the individuals who wrote that paper, and I've got a great deal of time for them. Mervyn's a decent human being, and if you have somebody coming from a religion that tells you something can't happen and that happens, then people are going to be in shock. And Mervyn was probably better at most in admitting what happened is not what they expected, and having some attempt to search for what the causes might be. But if you want to read something which makes sense on debt, read Anne Pettifor any day.
I can't believe we've not mentioned Anne.
Well, we have now. So, and a book by Anne, definitely worth reading. And she's just published a new one, actually, but I haven't had a chance to read. So Anne Pettifor's book I'd also put on that list. But reading Mervyn will give you an idea both of what the crisis felt like to somebody who had no idea it was going to happen. Read Anne and you'll see why it did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love her observation to people who just hadn't thought about government debt, that if there was no government debt, there would be no bonds. And, the fact that, people in the establishment, in government in the United States, that hadn't even occurred to them. There's so much of the trading on the financial markets is dependent on the trading of bonds without people even realizing what those bonds represent. It's a bit astonishing, isn't it?
The whole bloody field of economics is astonishing, and not in a good way.
All right, well, look.
On which note, Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy reading.
Listen, if you've never listened to us before, you've got Steve on a good day.
Thanks.
Next week, we are back to looking at, subjects in detail. We've just had a junior doctors strike in the UK. So are junior doctors underpaid? And what if we paid them more? Where does the money come from? and is the government in the UK actually trying to run down the health service? This is a leading question. Are they trying to run down the health service so they can privatise it? The answer to that is yes, by the way, if you haven't got time to listen next week. But anyway, we'll do that all in a bit more detail. Catch us next week. Have a great, enjoy the rest of the holiday season, Steve.
Will do, mate. Bye.
The Debunking Economics Podcast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please share it with your friends, like it on YouTube, and subscribe to this channel.